Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of Networking and Marketing Made Simple. Super excited for today's episode for a number of reasons. Number one, I'm excited for the guest I have for all of you today to share his incredible story of things that enabled him to make some amazing shifts in his life and career that is enabling him to do all of the incredible things that he's doing now. Plus, having a national best-selling author on here that is impacting a ton of people in such a positive way. I really don't want to waste any more time talking about what could be this episode and get into what is going to be the episode. So Craig Siegel, welcome to today's episode.
Scott, thank you so much for having me, brother. It's one of those rare connections where you meet somebody like, that's my people. It feels like we've known each other for a lot longer than we have. I'm excited to be here. There's no place in the world I'd rather be. Let's have some fun. Let's get nuts.
Yeah, no, listen, I'm all about it. And, you know, I always like to rewind the tape before we talk about everything that's going on right now. So if Craig could rewind his own life tape and press stop at a specific point that you really feel looking back was that needle moving moment for you, that light bulb moment for you, what was that moment?
Oh, that's easy for me. That was the lockdown in the beginning of the pandemic. And here's why. Prior to that, I had spent 13 years on Wall Street, but really 35 years trying to find myself. During my Wall Street career, I was making money. And at that season of life, I determined that to be what success meant. And just to be clear, I want to be responsible. Making money is absolutely a part of success, but not the whole thing. And a few years ago, I found myself in a dark place. As you can imagine with that business, very unpredictable. It got very stressful. A couple things happened at once. I just got out of a toxic relationship, never fun. My best friend, my pops, my dad had just gotten diagnosed with cancer, still battling. And even though I had my own business, wasn't exactly putting a dent in the universe. And I started drinking a little bit more than I'd like to admit. I think I was just trying to escape, but I didn't stay there long. I'm not sure if I found running or running found me. I had never been a runner before I was lifted weights. All of a sudden I started running. And to be more specific, I started running a bunch of marathons. And why that was so critical for me during this season is because not only did it give me purpose at a time when I desperately needed it, it showed that I could do hard things, but most importantly, and this is a good lesson here, it showed that I could be successful at something that I didn't necessarily have experience in, but I was still at my business. Fast forward the pandemic, bang. I mean, talk about a global awakening. For me, this was a historic opportunity, the great separator, if you will. And for the first time in my life, I just took a second, got really quiet, said to myself, if not now, then when? And I blocked out all the noise and the interference for the first time, really. And I just started connecting and I was available. And I started getting these downloads. It was like, of course, I had been obsessed with personal development for 15 years. It occurred to me in that moment, the big needle mover, that this was more than just a passion. This was my purpose. I asked myself what I'm good at. Everybody's good at something. Humbly, I could communicate pretty effectively. Literally the next day in a run, he came to me. I started my CLS brand. I came home. I put together a big vision, big difference between a dream and a vision. I was very specific, looked at it like a 10-lane highway, speaking, coaching, podcast, book deal, community, all the things. I reverse engineered. I had that one moment of, can I really do this? And then I considered the COI, the cost of inaction or the price of regret. And I leaned in. And for the first time in my life, I was in alignment. And I say very humbly, over the last 3 years, the brand exploded. We're one of the top podcasts on the planet, sponsored by Mark Cuban, speaking all over the world. Got the record first time author book deal as of today, national USA bestseller, all the things. It wasn't just a career reinvention, got engaged, a puppy, the whole thing. And my mission right now is to show everybody that playing small is canceled, how to think and play bigger, how to pivot successfully, and how to get clarity on why you're here. A little bit of a long-winded answer, but I wanted to give you and your listeners some context.
No, that's great. You know, again, details are important, and you know, it's important for people to know the story, not the glory, because a lot of people focus on where people are right now, but they really don't understand what things had to transpire in order for someone to get to where they are right now. So going back to the years on Wall Street, what are some, or one specific lesson that you learned or skill set or tool did you learn working on Wall Street for all those years that has enabled you to make that applicable to what you're doing with the CLS brand that if it wasn't for that experience, there wouldn't be this aspect to what you're doing now?
Discipline, in a word. I learned work ethic when I got to Wall Street, and I'm so grateful for that. And just to be clear, I wouldn't change the thing because I needed this all part of my journey to bring me to where I am and so forth. When I got to Wall Street, I learned personal development at the same time. Probably not a coincidence, but one thing that I really doubled down on was discipline. And I started to understand that you get out of this life what you're willing to put in, and you don't get what you want. You get what you're committed to. And I was committed to my goals, and I would do anything that I possibly could ethically to achieve them. And that also translated into running. And then sure enough, it translated into CLS. And one thing I like to tell everybody, because a lot of people see what I'm doing now and they're like, that's not in the cards for me, or how can I ever do that? And I want to let everybody know right now, you've been successful at something in your life. And it wasn't the thing that made you successful, it was you. And some of those traits or characteristics that made you successful are transferable. And so one of them that sticks out for me was discipline. And for anybody listening today, because I always like to make it applicable, wherever you are successful, you can take those traits and apply that to a new endeavor if you're looking to find yourself or reinvent.
So I always say the same thing because my background was in health and wellness. I had 3 family-owned gyms. I did personal training, sports nutrition, did some competing, and having the discipline of having a workout routine, just like with your running routine, having the discipline to have the proper dietary structure. It's those compounded things that you do day in, day out that lead to that end goal or the next thing that you're going to be working on. Because something that I truly believe in is that the peak of one mountain is the valley of the next. So you're constantly reaching, you're constantly climbing. Now, a lot of this obviously came about from lockdown, from the pandemic. A lot of people had to make shifts. You know, my wife and I have been running our online company and our business virtually for a few years at that point. So we were kind of like primed, ready, and already doing that. But there were a lot of people like you in the finance industry that were really forced into making, I don't want to say difficult decisions, but reinvention decisions where they were thinking about, okay, I can't sit still. I can't sit on my hands. I'm not a tree. I need to move. So what was that transition like for you? Or in, I guess, a better question, what was the most difficult aspect in going from working from Wall Street to working for yourself in the online capacity, building everything out that you were building, the book, the podcast, the community, the speaking? What did you find most challenging or the biggest learning curve in that process?
To be honest with you, everything about it felt good because I had been so miserable with where I was and what I was doing that I actually started to associate death with choosing to go back and be miserable. And so the scariness or the fear that most people face when they step into the unknown, for me, that transformed into excitement and enthusiasm because I was already living, in my opinion, my worst case scenario. So there was nothing super difficult. The only thing where I second guessed myself for a moment, in just a moment, was that I had about 275 Instagram followers at the time. I had no celebrity friends, no connections, no following. So I had that typical, I don't want to say imposter syndrome. I don't like the word syndrome. I don't want to give it power, but maybe feeling of unworthiness. Can I do this? It's a saturated space. Maybe it's too late. I probably should have started a podcast 5 years ago, all those things. And then I just took back control and I realized, look, it's never too late. You're never too old. It doesn't take time. It just takes alignment. And also, like, in regards to stepping into a crowded space, I know most people are scared by that. What I like to always say is there's always room for the best, right? And also, like, comparison, that's like a thing now on social media, and it's pretty toxic. You see other people winning and like it makes you second guess, can I do that? Or and I write about this in the book, and that's this. When you see others winning, if you're not clapping, you're missing the point. Because even if you don't like them, at the very minimal, what they're doing is showcasing what's possible. And if you're willing to put in the work, be creative, be resourceful, be committed, get off your butt once you fall on it, because in entrepreneurship, you will, and you're willing to learn, you will have tremendous success. You just got to stay in the fight. And so I guess that was the toughest thing for me, is stepping into a brand new arena that I had no experience in, But then as we discussed about 5 minutes ago, I realized that I'd been successful in other things before, and those traits were absolutely transferable.
Yeah, I think T.R. Vecker says it the best. You know, he wrote The Secret to the Millionaire Mind.
One of
Every
my
master was
favorites.
once a disaster. I mean, again, no one figures it out on day one. You know, we're all a work in progress. And I think that's the big thing. Well, I just want to kind of pivot really quickly and just say continued well wishes for your dad.
Thank you, brother.
You know, my father is also going through cancer himself. And I know this is maybe, I don't want to say a difficult question, but, you know, for me, I started to reflect a lot on my life when my father got his cancer diagnosis, and it just makes you really self-reflect about, you know, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? How am I doing it? But what's the bigger picture here? We're on this planet for such a short blip. Going through and you know, linking arms with your father as he's been going down his cancer journey, what kind of self-reflection did that cause or kind of bleed onto you as far as thinking about your life, your mortality, and, you know, how you want to show up every single day?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, my dad's no spring chicken. My dad's going to be 88 years young next month. But he was just one of those cats that was always super healthy. Everybody thought he was 20 years younger. In fact, my parents were a little bit older. They had me older. I have an older brother. They never told me their age until a little bit later in life. There was like, I don't know if they were insecure about it, whatever the case may be. So it's not like this happened when my dad was 30, where it was like, oh my God, life is so short. But also it shows you just how fragile life is. And also kind of off topic, but a year ago, last August, I was hit by a speeding car in Manhattan, hit and run. Look to my right, car hits me hard and then speeds off through 2 red lights. And physically, I was unscathed. And I know that wasn't a coincidence. We obviously have more work to do. But it's things like that, your pops getting diagnosed with cancer, that just makes you realize that nobody is immortal, right? In terms of this human experience. And sometimes that can provide, I don't want to say it's good, right? But sometimes that could provide a little bit extra oomph, a little bit extra pep in your step to create a sense of urgency to make every second count. And it made me think, like, when I got quiet in the lockdown, my pops has cancer. He's battling essentially for his life. And it's like, I'm waking up every day and going to a job, even though it was my own, that if I'm being honest, hate. Like, this isn't for me anymore. Like, I've outgrown this. What's the point? Is this all that's out there? And then it occurred to me that not only do I, but all of us have a choice. And I started choosing and investing in a different story. But what else is there? What can go right? And so I think when moments like that happen, it really allows you to reassess and create that extra sense of urgency.
So I mean, great answer. You know, I think the whole immortal aspect, I think people need to realize that, you know, cancer, whatever it is, we're not privy to escaping anything. You don't know when something is going to happen, where, when, how, but you really have to squeeze the juice out of every single day that you can. So, you know, with your CLS experience podcast, you've had some huge names. You've had movie stars, Alicia Silverstone. You've had top authors, John Gordon. You've had big inspirations like Ed Mylett, a ton, Shailene Johnson. Who, and again, you know, I can go down the list of names that have been on the podcast, but who would you say? And I remember I asked this question to, I had lunch with a couple big podcasters, and I'm always curious about this. I asked Lewis Howes this question, and I'm going to ask you the same one. Who was probably the most unexpected, and it's not to downplay any of the other guests, but who was that unexpected guest that you interviewed where you're like, you know, you press stop record and you were done, and after the interview you're like, wow, that was epic. And you know, I remember his interview with Kobe Bryant before Kobe had passed. He said that was the biggest needle mover for him. For you, with all the incredible people that you've got to connect with and interview, whose interview moved your needle the most after doing that interview?
A good question. You know, I enjoyed all the conversations, and I'm so passionate about the podcast. It's almost like, for me, and it's going to sound crazy, but it's like choosing your favorite kid. And it's hard to select a favorite episode, but you're asking something a little different. Like, who really surprised me, so to speak. That's a tough one. At the end of last year, I believe we had Hollywood actor Frank Grillo on. He's typically an action star. He's in The Purge, the Avenger movies, and stuff like that. And he was just so vulnerable. And I thought it was really special. We had some great conversations about mental health, and he was just opening up. And we talked about how he grew up in an Italian family where if a man showed emotion, you were considered weak and soft, and how he's trying to change a narrative and how that actually makes us powerful and vulnerable. And I just thought that was so beautiful. And I guess straight off the cuff, since he asked me, that pleasantly surprised me to hear that coming from such a badass action star. So I think I really dug that one.
So of who you haven't interviewed yet, who's that dream interview that you've been wanting to do that hasn't happened yet that will eventually happen?
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I mean, his documentary was amazing, and I think I recommend anyone to watch that, because everyone seeing and I learned something from that interview. You learn something once you dive into it. The fact that he was a millionaire even before he became a movie star through real estate, through Joe Weider's advice. I think just there are so many things to take away from that, but that's awesome. Now let's move into one of the newer big pieces of your journey and what's going on before we kind of round this interview out. Your USA Today new best-selling book, The Reinvention Formula. Obviously, I'm going to link the book in the description of this episode so everyone can grab their copy. So, number one, what inspired the writing of this book? And if you were to kind of fast forward someone finishing the book, what would you say would be one of the big lessons that someone should take away from reading this book, and why they need to?
Simple. Just that all the abundance out there, the career to die for, the fun, the relationships, the spirituality, the fitness, unapologetically making a lot of money, it's available for you, for everybody, and it's attainable. And a lot of people think that's not in the cards for them. Those markets, all the money, all the relationship, they already exist. It's on us to call it in, become available for it. And I've read a ton of self-help books and personal development books, and I really wanted to create something different. And that's exactly what the feedback's been. And I wanted to show you not only that everything's possible, but how. And I haven't done everything right my entire life, not even close, but I've done a lot right over the last 3 years. And one thing that I did really well is pivot successfully and totally reinvent myself. But how? And all the strategies, the tactics, the mindset, removing limitations, the branding, the sales, creating strategic relationships, and everything in between. And also, it's an easy read. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. This is kind of funny. When I met my fiance a little over 2 years ago, when we would travel, she'd always have this book with her, and it was a book by Jordan Peterson. And I don't know so much about that guy, but I hear good things. I imagine he's very brilliant. She's been on page 1 for 2.5 years. And when I ask her, you still trying to read that thing? She's like, yeah, it's very confusing. And I get through a couple pages and it feels like I ran a marathon. I don't know what's going on. And so that always stuck with me. And I wanted to create something that was very digestible and consumable. So you can digest it and then apply it immediately and elevate your life. And so those are the things that I'm hearing so far. And those were the intentions.
Man, I could not agree more. When I wrote my first business book back in 2018, I didn't want to make it something, as to your point. I didn't want it fluffy. I didn't want it to be so confusing to the reader where, again, they would pick it up and then put it down, pick it up, put it down. I wanted something where someone would pick it up and they were like, all right, let's go. They'd read the whole thing in a day or two and then learn what the things they need to do to apply to that, which I think is just brilliant. And I wish all books were like that, but again, you have to have a specific mindset going into writing the book. You always want to, and this is something that my wife and I always talk about in our mastermind, you have to think about the reader. You can't think about yourself. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the person that is thumbing through those pages. How would you want to digest that book? Would you want to, have it as a slow meandering thing? Or do you want it something that you're learning something? There's some nuggets to take away. There's some key takeaways at the end of each chapter, and it's moving the needle of your business and mindset forward. So if you could think right now with where you are to where you're going, and I know it's hard to predict the future because, again, we can only live for right now. where does Craig see himself in the next 2 to 3 years with everything that he's got on his plate right now?
This is probably not the answer you were looking for, but it's interesting because I was thinking about it this week, and that is this. The first time really in my life that I really got quiet and took a second to connect and be available and get those downloads was in the beginning of the pandemic. And that's when I put together CLS and what just happened with the book, the launch and the best-selling list. And there's more data to come over the next 24 hours. But I was just having this revelation on my flight home from LA from our book launch event this weekend. And it was like, this kind of feels like the end of the beginning, like a 3-year story arc. And now it's like, I really need to go inward and say, what is this next level of expansion really look and feel like? And so probably not the answer you're looking for, brother, but I'm going to do some assessing this week. I'm going to take some time to reset and really figure out what next is. I can tell you this, the mission has never stopped, and that is to extend the reach and inspire and help as many people as we possibly can. But what does that look like? Like we have the 10-lane highway, the speaking, the book, the podcast. What is the next level of expansion? And I'm really going to take some time to go inward and really figure out what that looks like over the next week or so. And I promise I'll give you feedback once I do.
No, listen, I completely agree. My wife and I talk about this all the time. We kind of chunk down our life, and you want to think about the end in mind. And again, just coincidentally, we met with our financial advisor today about all the things that we have planned for the future. And it's a good check for us, because you have to start thinking about, okay, here's where I am now, here's where I want to go. And just like you said, building that 10-lane highway, you have to reinvent all the time. You can't stand still. You can't run on that treadmill of life. You have to always move forward. But to your point, sometimes you got to look inward, download whatever you need to download, think about what you ever need to think about, put a game plan, and then take action on it. So obviously you got a lot of great things going out there, the book, the podcast. What would you say is the best place for someone to learn more about Craig Siegel and everything that he's working on? And again, if someone is interested in working more closely with you or diving into more of the assets that you have, who are the people that you like working with, and how can they do so?
Yeah, I think our website, Cultivate Lasting Symphony with CLS or play on my initials.com would be the best place. You can find a little bit about our community. We have what people say is the most unique, loyal, and engaging community out there. The CLS membership, that's a monthly subscription, 500 like-minded individuals, entrepreneurs, people trying to find themselves and so forth. We also have big guest speakers in there. We meet once a week. I do other things like masterminds, selective one-on-one coaching and stuff like that. It's a little bit more expensive. The membership is a great place to start. And then anywhere you listen to podcasts, the CLS Experience, anywhere you buy books, the Reinvention Formula, anywhere on social media at Craig Siegel _CLS. I do the best that I possibly can to interact. Obviously, at some point, I can't respond to everybody. But if you do reach out on one of the social platforms, there's a good chance that it will be me saying hello and getting back to you. So I love to connect with like-minded individuals. Come say hello.
Awesome. So just for all the listeners, all that information that Craig just dropped will be obviously in the description of this episode and the email that obviously coincides with this. So Craig, final question before we sign off. I know it's not going to be a hard question to answer, but what does success truly mean to you?
This is actually a pretty tough question, because I think if you ask 100 different people, you probably get 100 different answers. And let me tell you what success is not, which I know now. It's not dominating in just one area. I believe it's striving to succeed in all the areas: the career, the relationships, the wealth, the fitness, the spirituality, and all that stuff. And as long as you're waking up every single day and you have a purpose and you're fulfilling your assignment and you're moving closer to that and you're finding joy in it and you're happy, I believe that makes you successful.
And you are absolutely right. I'm closing in on 530 episodes of this podcast, and well over 250 episodes. And I've had 250 different answers, because success is not a linear thing. It means different things to different people. But what I can tell you is this: of all the successful entrepreneurs that I've interviewed, not one has said that the success they have is predicated on the money that they make. To your point, it's a side effect from the impact that you're having on those around you. It's that compounded effect. Craig, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time out. to be here today with my audience. I know you have a very productive schedule with the book launch and everything else that you're doing. And, just looking forward to continuing to support you and to connect and collaborate. I know my audience is going to take so much away from this episode, and I'm going to really encourage them to really take advantage of everything that you have, whether it's starting with the book, the membership, everything else that you have going on, because you're doing big things. You're helping a lot of people. And in all honesty, the world needs more people like you, and just grateful to have you in mind.
Thank you so much, but I look forward to doing a lot more together.
Absolutely. So everyone, as always, wherever you're listening to this to and from, please leave us a rating and review. Let us know what you loved most about the episode, but also if there's anything that we can do to make this podcast better. We love feedback. It's something that is encouraged, because I just want to make sure your experience is the one that you're looking for. So everyone, please enjoy the rest of your days, and I'll talk to you next time.